The Typhoon-class submarine could remain submerged for 120 days in routine conditions, and that endurance could be extended if necessary, especially in the event of a nuclear war, because it combined huge onboard stores, robust life support systems, and nuclear propulsion. Conceived at the height of the Cold War, when underwater platforms were central to strategic deterrence, the class emerged from a Soviet effort to ensure survivable second strike capability by putting as many nuclear weapons as practical beneath the ocean surface. By the 1970s, the Soviet Navy launched a massive program under the designation Project 941, Akula, to design an underwater vessel large enough to carry a very heavy strategic missile load while offering crew accommodations and ship systems capable of sustained patrols far from friendly ports. The resulting Typhoon class measured roughly 175 meters in length, with a beam of about 23 meters and draft near 12 meters, giving it a submerged displacement in the tens of thousands of tons and making it the largest submarine class ever constructed, powered by nuclear reactors that provided the endurance and energy needed for propulsion, onboard systems, and life support. The Typhoons were intended not only to match Western ballistic missile submarines in firepower, but also to operate for extended periods under Arctic and other demanding sea conditions. Their designers prioritized a balance of firepower, survivability, crew habitability, and the ability to transit long distances without resupply. The ships were fitted with strategic missile armament and self-defense weapons, as well as advanced navigation and sonar suites for their time, allowing them to perform the dual roles of deterrent patrol and, if called upon, to deliver strategic payloads. The scale of the platform also allowed for redundancies in key systems to improve resilience during long missions, accommodating a complement of around 160 sailors and officers. The vessels provided more comfortable living spaces than many smaller submarines. Because the designers had the physical volume to dedicate space to crew quarters, mess areas, maintenance workshops, medical facilities, and recreational areas, this relative comfort was important for maintaining morale and efficiency during patrols measured in weeks or months rather than days. During routine conditions, crew rotations, supplies, and maintenance cycles were planned to support the long submerged endurance. But in crisis scenarios, these boats were designed to remain on station for much longer if necessary, extending the platform's value as a secure element of strategic forces. After the Cold War, shifts in strategic priorities, the high cost of operating such large nuclear submarines, and the end of the intense superpower rivalry led to reductions in the number of active Typhoon-class boats and to changes in how navies approached sea-based deterrence. But the Typhoon legacy endures as a demonstration of the extremes of submarine design and Cold War engineering ambition. Raid: Shadow Legends is an ambitious cross-platform game available now for iOS, Android, and PC that combines collectible character progression, turn-based combat, and PvE and PvP systems so players can tailor their experience. You choose a personal champion from a roster of more than 600 warriors, assemble teams with synergies and complementary skills, and face dozens of enemies across campaign chapters with varied environments or compete against other players in arena matches and clan battles. The game features a large and growing cast of champions drawn from distinct factions, each with visual styles, abilities, and roles, damage dealers, tanks, support champions, and tricky utility units, and frequent updates introduce new characters, factions, mechanics, and balance changes that keep the meta evolving. Notable champions and faction themes contribute to emergent strategies. For example, powerful area control and crowd freeze effects make champions like Whirl and Frost King Tower dangerous in the right lineup, while single-target strike specialists such as Bella Long Braids excel in focused physical damage, and agile tech or lore-driven fighters like Gentoro bring speed and precision to engagements. The game also supports a wide set of progression systems, gear acquisition and upgrades, skill upgrades, ascension and rarity increases, artifact sets that change combat roles, and collectible shards that let you add new champions to your roster, and it layers events, seasonal passes, daily challenges, and limited-time content that reward participation and long-term play. Recent updates introduced a new faction, the Sylvan Watchers, which adds fresh place, champion interactions, and tactical depth. These characters expand the options for team building and counterplay, becoming either allies to bolster your lineup or threats you must prepare for when facing other players. Raid's cross-play design lets friends across mobile and PC play together, join clans, trade strategies, and take part in cooperative encounters, while monetization is handled through in-game stores, battle passes like the Forge Pass that offer powerful gear and cosmetics over a season, and optional bundles that accelerate progression for players who choose to purchase them. Players who link certain external services or hold subscriptions such as Amazon Prime can sometimes claim exclusive rewards, and new players often receive starter packs or links that grant bonus in-game currency, consumables, and a champion to help jumpstart their collection. If you haven't tried the game, starter offers typically include resources such as silver, experience boosts, energy refills, and summoning items to make early progression smoother, and community resources, guides, clan support, and tier lists help new players learn champion roles and effective team compositions as they advance through campaigns, dungeons, and player versus player content. Together, the Typhoon class and the world of Raid illustrate two very different types of scale and ambition. One rooted in Cold War era, naval engineering and strategic deterrence. The other in modern live service gaming that emphasizes collection, progression, and evolving multiplayer competition. They even squeezed in a solarium, a swimming pool, and a sauna to improve habitability on long patrols, and the Typhoon class SSBNs were equipped with extensive life support and storage capacity, so the crew could endure months underwater. The strategic missiles carried by the class were designed by Soviet bureaus including the Makaya Design Bureau and were given NATO reporting names such as SSN-20 Sturgeon, each missile capable of delivering multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, MIR, with published figures indicating 10 MIRVs per missile and massive launch weights, measured in the tens of thousands of kilograms. While individual warheads were rated in the order of 100 kilotons. The Typhoon's missile, Load 20 RSM-52, also called R-39 three-stage solid fuel, intercontinental ballistic missiles, required enormous internal volume and robust launch systems, forcing Soviet engineers to build a hull and internal structure far larger than conventional designs, so the ballistic missiles could be carried safely and launched reliably even in cold or rough seas. Because the R-39 family was substantially larger and heavier than many Western SLBMs of the time, the Soviets accepted the trade-offs in size and displacement to achieve extended range and powerful payloads, and the guidance suites combined inertial navigation with stellar updates to improve long-range accuracy to within a few hundred meters under optimal conditions. Beyond strategic deterrence, the Typhoon class carried a comprehensive suite of defensive and anti-ship weapons. The boats were fitted with multiple torpedo tubes of different calibers commonly described as a mix of larger 630mm tubes and smaller 533mm tubes, which could launch heavyweight torpedoes, anti-ship missiles, and anti-submarine weapons, such as rocket-propelled torpedoes, giving the submarine a credible self-defense and local area offense capability, in addition to its strategic role. Structurally, the Typhoon diverged from single-hull designs by adopting a multi-compartment layout with several pressure hulls housed inside an outer casing, an arrangement that created the characteristic broad slab-sided profile. This internal division simplified spacing for missile compartments and living areas, allowed redundant systems and better compartmental isolation in case of damage, and reduced the risk that a single hull breach would sink the whole vessel because flooding could be contained within a localized section. These design choices made the submarines unusually wide compared with Western boats and contributed to their iconic, almost industrial silhouette. Because the class was intended for operations beneath polar ice, designers incorporated ice-capable features including strengthened bows and sail structures, retractable masts and periscopes that could be raised through thin ice, and navigation tools for under-ice transit. The Typhoons also had retractable nose hydroplanes and stern stabilizing fins to aid handling at depth and during surfacing through ice. And their sensor fit included sonar arrays and navigation aids suitable for detecting threats, guiding launches, and safely traversing under-ice terrain. Performance figures often cited for the class place maximum submerged speeds in the low to mid-20s in knots, cruising speeds considerably lower for fuel-efficient transit, and test depths that allowed deep patrol and evasive maneuvering. While nuclear reactors provided essentially unlimited endurance for propulsion and onboard systems so long as food, consumables, and maintenance needs were met. Crew accommodations were unusually roomy by submarine standards. The internal volume permitted expanded mess and galley areas, medical facilities, workshops for onboard repairs, recreation rooms with the aforementioned sauna and pool, and storage for months of provisions. Designers understood that long patrols demanded more than minimal bunks, and that morale and medical readiness benefited from better spaces and amenities. Operationally, Typhoons were expected to perform long deterrence patrols, often in Arctic approaches, where their ability to hide under moving ice and remain on station for extended periods made them a core part of Soviet second strike planning. The boats could launch their strategic missiles while surfaced, or even while moored in certain conditions, adding flexibility to deployment and complicating adversary targeting assumptions. The sheer cost and complexity of building, operating, and maintaining these behemoths alongside changing strategic needs and arms control agreements meant that after the end of the Cold War the number of active Typhoons was reduced. Several were placed in reserve, some were cannibalized for parts or converted for experimental roles, and others were gradually decommissioned and dismantled as funding, treaty compliance, and shifting force structures changed priorities. Despite their eventual retirement, the Typhoon class left a technological and cultural legacy as extremes of Cold War engineering, demonstrating how superpower rivalry drove designers to explore novel submarine architectures, massive missile integration, and improved crew survivability and habitability. They remain a frequent subject of naval history, documentaries, and technical study because their scale, Arctic capabilities, and mixed-role design provide a striking example of how strategy shaped shipbuilding choices. They were substantially wider and taller than most contemporary submarines, a physical consequence of the enormous missiles and internal volume they were built to carry. And in total, Russia completed 6 Typhoon-class boats between 1976 and 1985. The ships were initially identified only by hull numbers, but the 4 vessels retained by the Russian Navy and later sponsored by cities or companies received formal names. The class led TK-208 becoming Dmitry Donskoy, which entered service in 1981, followed by hulls that would be known as Fyatoi Georgi, Arkhangelsk and Severstal in subsequent years. A planned 7th hull, TK-210, was ordered, but the program was cancelled before completion. In the early 1990s, there was a bold proposal to convert some of the Typhoons into under-ice cargo carriers to transport oil, gas, and other materials to Russia's remote northern territories by exploiting the boat's polar capabilities. The concept envisioned loading up to about 10,000 tons of cargo and moving it beneath the ice of the Barents Sea. But the logistical and engineering hurdles transferring product from offshore platforms into sealed submarine tanks, then offloading to tankers proved complex and expensive, and the conversions never became a practical large-scale solution. For most of their service, the class was assigned to the Northern Fleet. Dmitry Donskoy was the only hull to receive a substantial refit and was relaunched as a trials and test ship in the 2000s, while Arkhangelsk and Severstal were decommissioned or placed in reserve between roughly 2004 and 2006, and other sisters were ultimately scrapped. In 2011, the Defense Ministry moved to write-off Project 941 submarines in the face of arms reduction constraints and shifting priorities. And over the following years, the boats were gradually retired as Russia planned to replace them with the newer SSBNs in the post-Cold War years. International cooperation played a role in safely defueling and disposing of nuclear materials from these hulks. The United States assisted through cooperative threat reduction programs to remove nuclear fuel from at least one vessel at U.S.-funded processing facilities, with Allied participation in some stages, after which hulls were converted for long-term storage, test use, or dismantling. Dmitry Donskoy in particular spent her later career as a technology and missile testbed for new generations of Russian submarine systems, and even took part in naval parades and public demonstrations. She helped test the next generation of sea-launched ballistic missiles as the older R-39 family was retired and the newer solid-fueled Bulava RSM-56 was introduced. A missile reportedly capable of ranges in excess of 8,000 kilometers and, depending on the source, configured to carry large yield warheads. The Bulava, developed from land-based technology and intended for the newer Borei boats, was also trialed on Typhoon platforms during modernization experiments. But the Russian Navy eventually judged a full Typhoon modernization uneconomical. Refitting a single giant hull would cost as much as building two new boats, so the modernization program was cancelled and the last R-39 missiles were removed from service. As a result, the only Typhoon to remain operational was outfitted with the more modern RSM-56 Bulava for testing and remained in limited use until reports in 2022 about decommissioning and final disposition surfaced. Though accounts differed about the precise timing of her retirement, the Borei-class submarines that succeeded the Typhoons are smaller and more space-efficient at roughly 170 meters in length, typically carrying a complement of modern Bulava missiles and benefiting from advances in missile miniaturization, guidance, accuracy, automation, and lower lifecycle costs, making them a more practical, sea-based deterrent for contemporary needs. The Typhoon's enormous size reflected an era when strategic missiles were physically large and when designers prioritized raw missile volume, crew habitability, and Arctic operational capability. The boat's internal volume allowed amenities and storage on a scale rarely seen on submarines. But changing technologies, smaller, more accurate warheads, and more compact launch systems made such behemoths increasingly unnecessary. Whether there will ever again be a class of submarines built on the Typhoon scale remains doubtful, but their legacy endures as a dramatic symbol of Cold War naval engineering, ambitious strategic thinking, and the trade-offs between size, survivability, and cost. Thanks again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring Dark Seas. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to claim unique bonuses. And remember, in Raid Shadow Legends, you must strike hard and strike fast if you want to survive.